My name's Stella, I'm 38, and tonight was supposed to be my mom's birthday dinner. A quiet night to keep the peace. My mom, Joan, raised me to smile through everything, no matter how bad it hurt. My ex-husband showed up, my stomach turned, and right as my mom lifted her glass for a toast, my phone rang. It was my daughter whispering, "Mom, get out of the house. Tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe for more family drama and stories of emotional courage." I parked in front of my mother's house just before dusk. The porch light was already on, glowing yellow against the fading sky. A paper banner stretched across the front window, "Happy 60th, Joan," and a few balloons swayed in the warm evening air. I sat there for a moment with the cake box in my lap, breathing slow, rehearsing a smile I didn't feel. Her house had always carried a quiet kind of pressure, clean to perfection, curtains drawn, every item in its rightful place. I hadn't lived here in almost 20 years, but every time I walked up those steps, I still felt like the 16-year-old girl who never got anything quite right. When I rang the bell, her voice floated from the kitchen. "Doors open, Stella." That tone, cheerful but commanding, never changed. The smell of roasted chicken and lemon filled the hallway as I stepped inside. The laughter and clinking dishes coming from the dining room sounded warm, but my stomach stayed tight. I followed the sound, clutching the cake like it might somehow protect me. Mom turned from the stove when she saw me. She looked exactly the same, soft beige sweater, pearls, lipstick just a shade too bright. Her smile stretched wide, and for a second I wanted to believe it was real. "There's my girl," she said, arms open. I leaned in for a hug, breathing in that familiar lavender scent. Her embrace was gentle, but her hands patted my back twice, her quiet way of saying, "That's enough." "Hi, Mom," I said. "Happy birthday." The kitchen buzzed with small talk. My cousin Dave laughed too loud. Aunt Marcy arranged napkins for the third time. My younger brother, Tom, kept filling people's glasses like he was auditioning for good behavior. Everyone looked busy, like a family in a commercial. "Put that cake down before you drop it," Mom said with a chuckle that wasn't really a chuckle. She lifted the lid, inspected the frosting, then nodded. "You always bring something lovely." I smiled back, pretending not to notice her eyes flicking over the small crack in the icing. Nothing ever escaped her notice. Then I saw him. Mark. He stood near the dining room door, sleeves rolled up, laughing at something Tom said. My heart skipped, then thudded hard. My ex-husband, the man I hadn't spoken to in months, standing in my mother's house like he belonged there. No one had told me he was coming. He smiled when he saw me, that easy, polished grin that once melted every wall I built. "Hey, Stella," he said softly, like we were old friends catching up. I managed a polite nod. "Hi, Mark." Mom's eyes darted between us, assessing. "I invited him," she said, her tone light. "He's family after all." "Was," I corrected before I could stop myself. The air tightened. She smiled wider, pretending not to hear. Dinner went on. Plates passed, glasses clinked. My mind barely kept up with the small talk swirling around me. Every story, every laugh felt rehearsed. When Mom talked about how forgiving families could be, I saw Mark smirk out of the corner of my eye. I pushed my fork into the mashed potatoes and kept my mouth shut. I noticed small things, details that usually meant something with her. The back door was locked, though the night was warm. The family photos on the mantel had been rearranged. My father's picture, once in the center, was now off to the side. Little shifts, but each one pulled at me. Mom moved around the table like a hostess in a dream, pouring wine, cracking jokes, reminding everyone how time heals all wounds. Her voice was honey with sharp edges. I caught my reflection in the window behind her. My own tight smile, my eyes giving away what my lips couldn't. At one point, Tom leaned toward me and whispered, "She's got something for you. Some paper or document." "Paper?" I whispered back. He shrugged, looking uneasy. "She said it's from Dad's will. Something she forgot to give you." The word will hit me like static. My father had passed nearly a decade ago, and everything had already been settled. Why now? Mom tapped her glass with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention. "Before we cut the cake," she began, "I just want to say how thankful I am for my children, both of them, and how proud I am of the family we've built." Her eyes glistened with well-timed tears. She reached under the table and pulled out a brown envelope, sliding it toward me. Your father wanted you to have this, Stella. The room went quiet for a beat. My throat felt dry. I reached for the envelope, the paper cool under my fingertips. I hadn't even opened it yet when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it at first, thinking it might be a reminder or spam call. But then it buzzed again twice, 3 times. I pulled it out just enough to see the screen. Lily. My daughter. I smiled instinctively. Excuse me, I murmured, stepping away from the table. I walked into the hallway, pressing the phone to my ear. Hey, sweetheart, I whispered. Her voice came through shaky, barely above a whisper. Mom, get out of the house. I froze. What? Just please get out. The sound of her breathing filled the silence. My heart pounded, echoing in my ears. Lily, what's wrong? Are you okay? I heard something, she said. About Grandma and Mark. I'll explain later, but please, Mom, don't stay there. The phone felt slippery in my hand. My gaze drifted back toward the dining room, where my mother and ex-husband sat side by side, laughing softly about something. The envelope still waited where I'd left it. Lily, are you safe? Yes. I'm home, she said quickly. But Mom, they're planning something. Don't let her hand you anything. Just leave. I could barely breathe. My hand trembled, but my voice stayed even. Okay, sweetheart. Lock the doors. I'll call you soon. I hung up, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and tried to steady my breathing. When I turned the corner back toward the dining room, Mom was already watching me. Her expression was unreadable, calm, curious, maybe even expectant. Everything all right? She asked. Fine, I said softly, forcing a smile. She nodded and gestured toward the empty chair. Sit down, dear. We were just about to open your envelope. I hesitated. The walls felt closer now, the laughter a little too sharp. I sat, hands folded, eyes on that envelope. Mark leaned closer, his voice low. You can trust her, Stella. It's just legal stuff. Nothing complicated. I caught the faint smell of his cologne, familiar, sickening. My pulse thudded in my temples. Funny, I said lightly. You never were good with paperwork. He smiled, but his jaw tightened. Across the table, Mom's smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. I picked up the envelope, running my thumb along the edge. I didn't open it. Instead, I looked at both of them, the people who had shaped and broken me in equal measure, and felt something shift inside. Whatever was waiting in that envelope, I knew one thing for sure. This birthday dinner was never meant to celebrate my mother. It was meant to trap me. And now, thanks to that phone call, I was the only one who knew it. The envelope still sat on the table when my phone call ended, and everyone's laughter sounded just a bit too loud now, like a bad recording I couldn't turn off. I felt my fingers tingling, the kind of lightheaded numbness that comes before a storm. I looked at my mother and Mark, both smiling in perfect unison, like actors waiting for their cue. Inside, though, everything had shifted. I excused myself again, this time pretending to check on the dessert in the kitchen. The scent of lemon cake filled the air, sharp and sweet. My legs felt weak as I gripped the edge of the counter, pulling my phone from my pocket and hitting redial. Lily picked up right away. Mom! Her voice was small, shaky. That sound alone could have split my heart. I'm here, I whispered, glancing toward the doorway to make sure no one was listening. Tell me exactly what you heard. There was a rustle, then the faint creak of her chair. I was doing homework in the living room when Grandma called someone. She didn't know her phone was on speaker. I heard her say your name. She said, Mark will make sure she signs tonight. My mouth went dry. Signs what? I don't know, Lily said. Then she said something about the house and how you'd think it was from Grandpa's will. My heart kicked against my ribs. Grandpa's will. That's what Tom mentioned. That envelope. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles ached. And you're sure she said that? I asked quietly. I recorded it, Mom, Lily whispered. I didn't mean to at first. I just hit record because I thought it was weird. Do you want to hear it? A lump rose in my throat. Yes. Play it. The line went silent for a few seconds. Then came the faint, grainy sound of my mother's voice through the speaker. Mark, she's too emotional. We'll just say it's what her father wanted. Once she signs, it's over. No arguments this time. My knees almost buckled. The world tilted, pressing down on me like invisible weight. Then Mark's voice came through the recording, calm and smug. Don't worry. She still trusts you more than anyone. She won't question it. I bit my lip so hard I tasted metal. I had to sit down before I fell. The kitchen chair creaked beneath me as I whispered, "Oh, Lily." Her voice trembled. "Mom, are you okay?" I forced my breathing to slow, fighting the tears rising behind my eyes. "I'm okay, sweetheart. You did the right thing calling me. Thank you." There was a pause. "Are you coming home?" "Soon," I promised, glancing back toward the dining room. "Just stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone." "I won't," she said softly. "Mom." "Yes. I know Grandma's your mom, but she didn't sound like a good person." That sentence stung in a way I couldn't describe. "I know, baby. Sometimes people hide who they really are, even from their own family." When I hung up, I just sat there for a moment, staring at the floor tiles. They were spotless, shining, not a single scuff or crumb in sight. My mother always said a clean floor reflected a clean heart. Funny how wrong she was about both. I looked toward the dining room again. I could hear Mom's laughter blending with Mark's low voice. Every word they spoke now sounded like lies. I needed a minute to think. I couldn't storm out. It would only make them suspicious. I couldn't confront her yet, not without proof. I needed to see what was in that envelope. Quietly, I stood and walked to the small side hallway that led to her study. The door was open just a crack. My mother never left that room unlocked when guests were over. That alone made my heart beat faster. Inside, her desk looked like a shrine to control. Neatly stacked folders, polished pen set, bills organized by month. I moved quickly but carefully, checking drawers for anything labeled with my name. Nothing. Then I saw a second envelope, identical to the one on the table, peeking out from beneath a pile of receipts. My fingers trembled as I slid it free. The flap wasn't sealed. Inside were two printed forms, a transfer deed and a signature line. My name was typed neatly in the grantor section. Property address. My father's old workshop, the only part of his estate that had stayed in my name. The realization hit like cold air. They were trying to take it. A sudden voice behind me made me flinch. "Looking for something?" Mark stood in the doorway, one hand resting on the frame, the other holding a wine glass. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I straightened, clutching the papers behind my back. "Just looking for a napkin. Mom's out." He tilted his head. Funny place to look. The silence stretched between us like a rope ready to snap. Then, without another word, I brushed past him, forcing my expression into something neutral. My heart was hammering so hard it was hard to breathe. "Dinner's getting cold," he said as I walked away. I didn't answer. I slipped the papers into my purse, smoothing the flap closed just as I re-entered the dining room. Mom turned toward me with a bright smile. "There you are. We thought you ran away." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said, taking my seat again. She pushed the brown envelope toward me, her manicured fingers resting on the edge. "This means a lot to me, Stella. It's something your father wanted." Her eyes held mine with practiced warmth. I studied her face, the perfect makeup, the calm demeanor. No flicker of guilt, no sign of shame. How long had she been planning this? I opened the envelope slowly, careful not to reveal that I already knew. Inside, I found what I expected. The same property documents. Except this version already had Mark's signature at the bottom. My stomach dropped. "Go ahead," Mom said softly. "It's just a formality." I glanced toward the other guests. Most were busy chatting, unaware of the quiet tension thickening around the table. Only Tom looked uneasy, watching me carefully. "Mom," I said finally, "what's this really about?" Her lips tightened. "I told you, it's part of your inheritance. The lawyer forgot to process it." "That's odd," I said, my voice steady, "because the lawyer told me everything was finalized years ago." Her smile faltered for the first time that evening. "Well, maybe you don't remember correctly." I did remember. I remembered every sleepless night after Dad died, every form I signed, every argument Mom caused because she wanted control of the workshop. The way her fingers twitched told me she knew I wasn't buying it. Mark reached across the table, placing a pen in front of me. "Just sign, Stella. Let's make it easy for everyone." Something in his tone, calm, condescending, sparked an old anger deep in my chest. Easy for who? I asked quietly. He chuckled, sipping his wine. You always make things harder than they need to be. That was his favorite line when we were married. A simple way to make me doubt myself. I didn't fall for it then, and I sure wasn't going to now. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. You know, I've learned something tonight, I said softly. Trust is the most expensive gift you can give someone. And once it's gone, you never get it back. Mom blinked, confused by my tone. What are you talking about? I smiled faintly. You'll see. I stood, picking up my plate under the excuse of getting dessert. My hands were steady now, my thoughts clear. I needed to call Lily again, but not from here. In the kitchen, I reached for my phone. Before I could dial, Tom stepped in quietly. What's going on? He whispered. I looked up at him, debating how much to say. He'd always been the peacekeeper, the one trying to hold the family together no matter how bad things got. She's lying, Tom, I said finally. Mom and Mark are trying to take Dad's workshop. Lily heard them. His face paled. What? Are you sure? I opened my purse and showed him the duplicate documents. He scanned them, his jaw tightening. I knew something felt off, he muttered. She made me print those last week, said they were just copies for insurance. My chest tightened. You printed these? He nodded, guilt flickering across his face. I didn't know, Stella. I swear I didn't. I believed him. Tom was naive, not cruel. I need your help, I said quietly. Don't say anything yet. Just keep her distracted. I'll handle the rest. He hesitated, then gave a small nod. Be careful. I waited until he walked back to the dining room before pulling out my phone again. The message from Lily still glowed on the screen. Please get out of there. I typed back quickly, I will. Soon. Thank you, sweetheart. Then I looked at my reflection in the dark window above the sink. I barely recognized myself. Calm, deliberate, determined. The scared version of me, the one who always gave in to keep peace, wasn't here tonight. From the other room I heard Mom's voice again. Still laughing, still performing. I slipped my phone into my pocket and took a deep breath. The voice that had changed everything wasn't just Lily's anymore. It was mine, finally ready to speak the truth. And for the first time in years I wasn't afraid of being heard. The sound of clinking glasses floated through the room as I walked back toward the table. The hum of conversation wrapping around me like a thin, suffocating veil. Candles flickered on the polished wooden surface, their golden light dancing over faces that smiled too easily. My mother sat at the head, her expression composed, glowing with the satisfaction of control. Mark was by her side, whispering something that made her laugh softly. It should have felt like a celebration, warm, familiar, full of laughter. But the air had shifted. Every smile seemed rehearsed. Every word felt heavy with hidden meaning. The birthday banner behind Mom shimmered faintly under the chandelier's light, and for the first time, it looked more like a warning than a decoration. I took my seat, my pulse steady but strong. I'd already made up my mind. If they wanted a performance tonight, I'd give them one they'd never forget. Tom caught my eye from across the table. He gave the slightest nod, just enough to remind me that I wasn't completely alone in this. I managed a faint smile, though my hands trembled slightly under the tablecloth. Mom raised her glass. To family, she said sweetly, her voice warm and clear. And to forgiveness, even when life doesn't go as planned. Her words landed like sharp glass. Forgiveness. I wondered if she even knew what that word meant anymore. Everyone echoed, to family, and took a sip. I did too, letting the wine touch my lips without really tasting it. My thoughts were already miles ahead. Mark leaned forward. Stella, before dessert, maybe you can take a look at the document again. Just to clear things up before we forget. I set my glass down, keeping my tone light. You're right. We wouldn't want to forget something so important. Mom smiled approvingly, clearly thinking I was coming around. Good girl. I knew you'd understand. Her words made my skin prickle. Good girl. I'd heard that my entire life. Whenever I gave in, whenever I stayed quiet, whenever I allowed her to make decisions for me. Not tonight. I pulled the brown envelope closer, flipping it open with deliberate calm. My heart pounded as I looked at the papers I already knew were fraudulent. You know, I began, my voice steady but cold. It's funny how Dad's handwriting looks so different here. Especially since these were supposedly written before his illness. Mom froze for a fraction of a second, so brief that most wouldn't have noticed, but I did. Mark cleared his throat. The lawyer must have retyped the document. I said, pretending to think. That's possible. Except, Dad's lawyer passed away 2 years ago. The air in the room shifted again, heavier this time. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. Tom leaned forward slightly, his expression tight with anticipation. Mom's smile wavered, but she quickly recovered. Stella, this isn't the time or place for this kind of talk. It's your birthday, dear. I let out a soft laugh that didn't sound like me. You're right, Mom. It is my birthday, which makes it the perfect time to celebrate honesty. Before she could respond, I pulled out my phone and placed it face up on the table. The screen glowed faintly, displaying the audio file Lily had sent earlier. Mom's eyes widened slightly. What's that? Just something I thought everyone should hear. I hit play. The faint crackle of the recording filled the silence. Then, clear as day, came my mother's voice. Mark, she's too emotional. We'll just say it's what her father wanted. Once she signs, it's over. Then Mark's voice followed, casual and confident. Don't worry. She still trusts you more than anyone. She won't question it. A gasp rippled around the table. One of the guests dropped her fork. Mark's face drained of color. You're misunderstanding. But I cut him off. No. I'm finally understanding everything. Mom's lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time in years, she looked truly speechless. The power she carried so effortlessly had slipped away, and all that remained was the cold truth reflected in every shocked pair of eyes around the table. Tom stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. Is this true, Mom? She turned toward him, her mouth twitching, trying to form a denial. Tom, you know how your sister is. She's always dramatic. That recording could have been edited. Edited? I repeated with a sharp laugh. By who? Your granddaughter. She glared at me, her composure cracking. You don't understand the full situation, Stella. Your father wanted what's best for the family. I was only making sure you got what you wanted, I interrupted. Just like always. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the candles seemed to burn lower. One of the guests whispered something to her husband and quietly excused herself from the table. The rest stayed frozen, unwilling to move but desperate not to meet anyone's eyes. Mark stood abruptly, his chair tipping slightly backward. Enough of this, he snapped. You're humiliating yourself. Humiliating myself? I said softly, rising to my feet. I think I've been doing that for years by trusting you. He stepped closer, his voice dropping low. You're making a scene. Good, I said, meeting his stare. Maybe it's time everyone finally saw one. For a moment I thought he might say something cruel, something to regain control, but instead, he glanced toward Mom, silently begging for her lead. She looked too stunned to give one. I turned to the others. For those who don't know, Mark and I were married once, and I thought I'd seen the worst of his lies then. But apparently he's been practicing. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter passed through the guests, half disbelief, half sympathy. Tom rubbed his temples. This can't be happening. Oh, it's happening, I said quietly. And it's been happening for years. Mom slammed her hand on the table, startling everyone. Enough. This is not how a family behaves. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who taught me to smile even when it hurt, to hide pain behind politeness, to never question authority. For the first time I didn't see strength. I saw fear. Family doesn't trick each other, Mom, I said softly. Family protects each other. You forgot that. The candles flickered, casting uneven shadows across her face. For a moment she looked older, tired, almost fragile. But then her expression hardened again. You're being emotional, she said coldly. You always were. I smiled faintly. Maybe. But at least my emotions are honest. The tension hung thick and unrelenting. Finally, Tom broke the silence. I think we should end this dinner. No one argued. Chairs scraped softly against the floor as people began to stand. The warmth of the evening had vanished, replaced by something brittle and cold. Mom didn't move. She sat stiff and silent, her eyes fixed on the untouched cake in the center of the table. As everyone drifted away, I turned toward her one last time. "You could have told me the truth," I said quietly. "It wouldn't have changed my love for you. But now—" Her voice came out like a whisper. "You think you know everything. But one day you'll see why I did what I did." I nodded slowly. "Maybe. But tonight I see you for who you really are." I picked up my purse, the envelope still inside, and walked toward the door. Behind me I heard Tom trying to calm her, his voice soft but strained. When I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like freedom. The stars were faint above the city lights, and the sound of distant laughter drifted from the neighboring houses. But I didn't feel empty. For the first time in years I felt awake, raw, alive, and unshaken. I walked toward my car, the gravel crunching beneath my heels. Halfway there, I heard the door open behind me. "Stella," Tom called. I turned. His face was pale, his eyes heavy with guilt. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have protected you sooner." I shook my head. "You didn't do this, Tom. She did." He looked down, his voice barely a whisper. "She's not well, you know. Losing Dad changed her. She's not the same." "Neither am I," I said softly. "And maybe that's the problem. I stopped letting her control me." He nodded slowly, understanding more than words could express. "You're leaving." "For now," I said, opening my car door. "But this isn't over." He gave a small sad smile. "Then I'll be here when you come back." I started the engine, my hand steady on the wheel. As I pulled away, the house shrank in my rearview mirror. Bright lights spilling through the windows, but all the warmth gone. The celebration had ended. But the cold truth it revealed would linger far longer than the candles ever could. And deep down I knew, some endings are colder than silence itself. The night air clung to me as I drove away from Mom's house, the headlights cutting through a thin veil of mist that had begun to settle over the quiet street. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, though I couldn't tell if it was from anger, sadness, or disbelief. Maybe all three. The sound of my mother's voice, calm, manipulative, and still echoing from that dinner table, played in my mind on a loop. "You think you know everything." The way she said it haunted me. It wasn't defensive. It was certain. And that certainty left me uneasy. By the time I reached home, the house felt colder than usual. Lily's old drawing still hung by the refrigerator, faded from years of sunlight and time. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, grounding me in reality when my thoughts wanted to drift back to the chaos I'd left behind. I set my purse on the counter and sank into the kitchen chair. For a while I just sat there staring at my phone, waiting for something. Maybe a message, maybe an explanation that would make everything make sense. But nothing came. Until it did. A soft buzz broke the silence. A message from Tom. "You need to come back. She's saying things that don't sound right. Please." I stared at the screen, unsure what to feel. My first instinct was to ignore it. I'd already given enough of myself tonight. But something in his words, "Don't sound right," gnawed at me. 15 minutes later, I was back in my car, the tires crunching over the wet pavement. The drive back felt shorter this time, almost too short. As I pulled into the driveway, the house still glowed with light, though the party guests were long gone. Tom met me at the door, his face pale. "She asked for you," he said quietly. "She hasn't said a word to anyone else since you left." I followed him into the living room, where Mom sat on the edge of the couch. Her birthday cake still sat on the table beside her, untouched except for the melted candles. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of what had happened had finally caught up to her. When she looked up, her eyes weren't angry anymore. They were tired, almost frightened. "Stella," she said softly, "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," I replied, my voice flat. She nodded, as if she expected that. "I suppose I deserve that." For a moment silence stretched between us. Tom hovered by the doorway, uncertain if he should stay. I gestured for him to leave us alone, and after a hesitant glance, he did. When the door closed behind him, she spoke again. "There's something you need to know. Something I should have told you years ago." I folded my arms. "You mean besides forging Dad's will?" She flinched slightly. "It wasn't about money, Stella. It was never just about that." I wanted to scoff, but something in her tone made me pause. She wasn't defensive now, she was unraveling. Then what was it about? I asked quietly. She looked down at her hands. When your father got sick, we thought he'd recover. He didn't want you or Tom to know how bad it was. He made me promise not to tell either of you until the end. Her voice trembled. But when he realized he was running out of time, he changed his will. Not to hurt you, but to protect you. I frowned, unsure whether to believe her. Protect me from what? Her next words hit me harder than I expected. From Mark. The name alone made my heart drop. What are you talking about? She took a shaky breath. Your father knew things about him. Things he didn't tell you because he didn't want to ruin your marriage. He had evidence. Proof that Mark was manipulating the company accounts, moving money without authorization. He was planning to confront him, but then he got too sick. My stomach turned. That's not possible. Mark wasn't even. He was, she interrupted gently. He was using your name on documents. Your father found out, but he didn't want to drag you into legal trouble. That's why he changed his will. He wanted everything transferred temporarily to me. So Mark couldn't touch it. I felt dizzy, gripping the back of the chair for balance. And you never told me any of this? Tears welled in her eyes, glistening under the soft lamplight. I couldn't. By the time your father passed, Mark had already convinced half the board that I was unstable. If I had come forward then, no one would have believed me. I sat down slowly, the room tilting around me. So you lied. You kept the money, pretended it was yours, and let me hate you all these years just to protect me. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Hate is easier to live with than seeing you destroyed. For a long time I didn't speak. My mind replayed every memory, every argument, every moment that I thought she was being cruel. Had she really been protecting me all along? Or was this just another manipulation? Why tell me now? I asked finally. Her answer was almost a whisper. Because I don't think I'll be around much longer. My chest tightened. Mom, don't say that. She gave a faint, tired smile. You think I don't know? My heart's been failing for months. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Tom. I stared at her, feeling my anger slowly fade into something heavier, something closer to grief. You should have told me. I couldn't, she said softly. You would have come running. You always do. And I didn't want that guilt to tie you to me again. Tears burned the back of my throat. You're unbelievable, I whispered. Even when you're dying, you're still trying to control everything. She smiled faintly. Old habits die hard. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This was your father's letter, she said. The real one. I kept it hidden because I wasn't sure you were ready to see it. I hesitated before taking it. The paper felt fragile, worn from years of being unfolded and refolded. My father's handwriting leapt off the page. Slanted, confident, unmistakable. My dearest Stella, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the time I hoped for. I've made arrangements that may not make sense right now, but trust that they were made with your safety in mind. The people you trust most may not be who they seem. When the time is right, your mother will tell you the truth. Believe her, even when it's hard. My hand shook as I read the last line. Mom watched me, her eyes searching mine. I never wanted to hurt you, she said quietly. But I couldn't risk losing everything your father built. I folded the letter carefully, pressing it to my chest. You lost me instead. Her face crumpled, and for the first time that night, she cried. Not with the quiet, controlled tears of guilt, but the deep, shaking sobs of someone who'd carried too much for too long. Instinctively, I reached for her hand. It was cold, frail, and trembling in mine. We sat like that for a while. No words, just the weight of everything unspoken between us. Finally, she looked up. There's one more thing, she said. The call you got tonight from Lily. My heart jumped. What about it? She wasn't just warning you. She was here earlier. What? She came by this afternoon, Mom said weakly. She said she wanted to surprise me. But then she overheard Mark talking on the phone in the backyard. He was angry, said something about finishing what he started. She didn't understand what he meant, but she told me she got scared and left. When she heard what happened at dinner, she called you. The room spun for a second. You're saying Mark was here? She nodded slowly. He came before the party. Said he wanted to apologize, but he wasn't himself. He looked desperate. I thought it was about the will. But now I'm not so sure. My pulse quickened. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Because, she said weakly, I thought it was over. I didn't want to ruin your father's memory any more than I already had. I stood, pacing the room, my mind racing through the implications. Mark hadn't given up. He was still trying to manipulate something, maybe even something worse than money this time. When I turned back, Mom's eyes were half closed, her voice barely above a whisper. You need to be careful, Stella. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. Mom, I said, kneeling beside her. What did he say exactly? She opened her mouth to speak, but the sound that came out was faint, almost inaudible. He said, if she won't listen, she'll learn the hard way. My blood ran cold. Mom, I whispered, gripping her hand, we'll handle this. Together. But she only smiled weakly. I just wanted you to know the truth before it's too late. Her breathing slowed, and for a terrifying moment, I thought she might slip away right there. But she steadied herself, whispering, forgive me, Stella. I squeezed her hand tighter. I already did. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window pane. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, breaking the stillness. In that fragile moment, the years of anger, misunderstanding, and resentment dissolved into something simpler. Two women who had finally stopped fighting long enough to see each other clearly. The confession had come too late to erase the past, but it was enough to change everything that came after. And as I looked at her, fragile and fading but finally honest, I realized that truth doesn't always arrive in time to heal. But sometimes it arrives just in time to matter. The room had fallen into a silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy, loaded with the weight of everything that had just been said. My mother sat there, her hands trembling as if the truth she had just learned had drained the warmth out of her veins. Across from her, Mark avoided my gaze, pretending to look at the floor, at the shattered glass, at anything but me. I didn't speak. Not at first. I just stood there, feeling the quiet pulse of anger beneath my skin. A calm, steady kind of fire that didn't burn wildly anymore. It was controlled. After everything, after the lies, the betrayal, the manipulation, what was left inside me wasn't chaos. It was clarity. When I finally spoke, my voice came out even, almost soft. Mom, I said, you deserve the truth, and I think you've heard enough tonight to see who's been honest and who hasn't. She looked up at me with eyes that seemed years older than they were. Her mascara smudged from tears. I don't understand how I didn't see it, Stella, she whispered. I gave her a faint, weary smile. Because you trusted the wrong person. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair. This isn't fair, he muttered, his tone low, defensive. You're twisting things, Stella. You've always hated me because I cut him off, not with words but with silence. I turned my gaze to him, steady, unflinching. He froze mid-sentence. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw fear flicker behind his eyes. He wasn't scared of what I'd say. He was scared of what I might do. That's when I realized revenge didn't have to be loud, dramatic, or even visible. It didn't need shouting, slamming doors, or public humiliation. The quiet kind of revenge, the one that takes its time, that lets the truth speak louder than anger, that was the kind that lasted. So I didn't fight him anymore. I didn't argue. I didn't throw accusations. I simply stood, took my mother's hand gently and said, you don't have to stay here tonight. Let's go home. She hesitated, glancing toward Mark. But the party, everything's a mess. Let it be, I said softly. Some things are meant to fall apart. We left him sitting there, surrounded by half-eaten cake and the wreckage of what was supposed to be a celebration. I could still hear the soft hum of the string lights as we stepped outside. The same lights that, an hour ago, had felt festive. Now they just seemed to expose the truth in sharp, unforgiving clarity. The drive home was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt necessary. My mother stared out the window while I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel just a little too tightly. Finally, she said, Stella, I feel like I don't know who I've been living with. You trusted him, I replied gently. That's not a weakness, Mom. That's love. But love shouldn't come with manipulation or secrets. She didn't answer right away, but I could tell she was processing everything. The night had ripped something apart inside her. something that couldn't be glued back easily. When we got home, she went straight to her room. I lingered in the living room, staring at the family photos on the wall. There was one from a summer barbecue. Mom smiling, Mark's arm draped around her, and me beside them, smiling because she looked happy. Now I saw it differently. The image wasn't a memory anymore. It was a warning I hadn't recognized back then. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was a message from my daughter, Emily. Emily, is Grandma okay? I couldn't sleep after last night. I smiled softly at the screen. She's okay, I typed back. It'll take time, but she's stronger than she knows. Then Emily replied with something that made my chest ache. Emily, you were brave, Mom. I was scared when I called you, but you handled everything so calm. How did you do that? I stared at her message for a while before replying. Because sometimes, Emily, the quietest reaction leaves the loudest impact. And that was the truth. Over the next few days, things began to shift, not dramatically but noticeably. My mother started making small decisions for herself again. She went through her files, found documents Mark had handled without her knowing, and called her lawyer. There were finances, property papers, and insurance details, all tangled threads of control he had woven so carefully. But one by one she started to untangle them. I watched her with quiet pride, never pushing, never demanding she confront him. She needed to reclaim her voice her own way. And when she did, it would be on her terms. One afternoon, while she was sorting through her desk, she looked up and said, Stella, do you think revenge ever makes people feel better? I thought about it for a moment. I think the right kind of revenge does, I said. Not the kind that hurts people back, but the kind where you take back what they tried to steal from you. Your peace, your strength, your control. She nodded thoughtfully. Then maybe I'm already getting mine. That evening, Mark showed up at our house. I wasn't surprised. People like him don't like losing control. They always come back trying to fix what they broke, but only if it benefits them. I opened the door before he could even knock twice. He looked tired, unshaven, and desperate. Can I talk to your mother? He asked. She's resting, I said firmly. He tried to look past me. Stella, I made mistakes, okay? But it's not what you think. I love your mom. Things got complicated. You can't let her walk away like this. His voice cracked on the last sentence. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. But I didn't feel sorry for him. Complicated. I repeated quietly. That's an interesting word for betrayal. He sighed, rubbing his face. You've always hated me. You never gave me a chance. I leaned against the doorway, crossing my arms. I gave you years of chances, Mark. You used every single one to prove I was right about you. His jaw tightened. You're trying to turn her against me. No, I said. You did that all by yourself. He stared at me, and for a brief second I saw the mask slip, the one he'd worn so well around my mother. The charming, polite man disappeared, replaced by the one who always needed control. I'll fix this, he muttered. You'll see. She'll forgive me. I smiled faintly. Maybe she will. But even if she does, she'll never see you the same way again. And that's something you can't fix. Then I closed the door. Slowly, firmly. Later that night, I found my mother sitting in the living room again, looking through old photo albums. She didn't seem sad anymore, just reflective. You know, she said, tracing a finger over a picture of her and Mark at a vacation spot. I thought I'd miss him. But what I actually miss is the version of myself I used to be before him. The one who trusted too easily. I sat beside her. That version of you wasn't weak. She just loved without expecting betrayal. She looked at me, her eyes soft. And what about you, Stella? Do you think you'll ever stop feeling angry? I thought about it. I already have, I said honestly. Anger was heavy. Letting go felt lighter. That's my kind of revenge. Living in peace while he keeps trying to figure out how I'm not broken. She smiled faintly, nodding. Quiet revenge, huh? Exactly. Weeks passed. Mark tried to contact her again through friends, through family. But she didn't respond. She changed her phone number, blocked his emails, and moved forward. One day she received a letter. His last attempt. He apologized, begged, explained, twisted, pleaded. She read it once, then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. No reply. No closure. Just silence. Because silence sometimes is the answer. Months later, life began to feel normal again. My mother started gardening, joined a local art class, and even hosted dinners again. Real ones filled with laughter and warmth, not hidden tension. Emily visited often, always hugging her grandma a little tighter. And me? I finally stopped replaying that night in my head. Because I realized something: the real revenge wasn't in making someone suffer. It was in watching them lose the power they once held over you. The quiet kind of revenge doesn't need a plan or a confrontation. It's not about what you say or do. It's about how you live after the storm. As I sat on the porch one evening watching the sun sink behind the trees, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Mark had been right about one thing that night. The truth changes everything. But what he didn't understand was that freedom changes more. And for the first time in years I felt free.